Delvin Carter, welcome to Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Thank you for having me, sir. How you doing?
Doing great. So I saw you interview on the Breakfast Club, and what I was intrigued by was the fact that something that we talk a lot about on this show, this being Black-owned, independent media outlet, focusing on not asking other folks for permission to do what we do, and that's what I thought was also intriguing about what you are doing with Sia Collective, and your deal is there's something we can't make, and so. Where did it all begin for you? What was that moment where you said, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to actually build it myself and not actually wait for other people?
So that moment, that's a great question. So that moment happened for me. I was still enlisted in the United States Coast Guard. And at the time, I was living in New York, and my daughters, because I'm divorced, I was divorced at the time, I'm married now, but they were living here and I was living in New York. And I just was like, you know what, I can't continue to live like this, to have my kids have to only see me on holidays and stuff like that. So I got the military to transfer me back to the Bay Area. And when I got here, I said, you know what, I need to make extra money. So I was always good at customizing shoes, which is like taking them apart, remaking them. And I had a lot of orders, and I'm in my military uniform at the post office, and I have like 10 boxes of custom orders that I have to send out to the clients. And I'm sitting on the line, not sitting on line, but I'm standing on line, and I'm looking at the cashier in the post office. And this is no knock to postal workers, but I looked at him and I said, you know, when he was a kid, did he tell his mom, you know, I want to work for the post office when I get older? And, you know, and me as a parent with daughters, and I want to tell them, you know, follow your dreams. But here I am compromising my dream, you know, just for a paycheck. So it was at that moment in the line, I said, you know what? I have to start making my way out of the Coast Guard and making my way as, you know, as what I feel like my God-given talent was. And that was the design, clothing, shoes, and things of that nature. So it was at that moment at the post office where I said, you know what? I can't be scared, because I don't want to be a hypocrite as a parent. I want to tell my child, like, you can do this. It's okay to chase your dreams. And if I didn't like give up an 11-year military career where I only had 9 years left to get a retirement check, I felt like I would be a hypocrite to tell them, no, chase your dreams, because it was never my dream to be in the military. It was my dream to be a designer, but I made a promise with my sister, if I didn't make it in fashion by the age of 25, that I would give the armed forces a try, and that's what happened.
And one of the things that I think is interesting about that, again, you know, we're living in a time where folks want to take chances, want to take risks, but also there are people who have fear. And you talked about, you know, seizing the moment. And so how did you explain to others who, I guarantee you there's no doubt in my mind, there are people who came to you and said, dude, you crazy. You're absolutely out of your mind. What's wrong with you? You can't do this. Or you actually think you can make shoes and clothes and shades and everything else? You're out of your mind. And so how did you respond to folks who doubted you, who may have been haters, who had fear themselves?
All right. So when you're in the military, it's pretty much you're just you're a prisoner. You know what I'm saying? You have the same exact mentality as a person in jail, because the 1st and 15th, you know you're getting paid. Uncle Sam's telling you when you're going to your doctor's appointment, such and such. So we have that same kind of mind state that we are like prisoners in a way. So when I was going to get out of the Coast Guard, a lot of my military brothers were like, man, you know, the economy's not good, man. They were more scared for me than I was scared. But I was terrified, because, see, the thing is, when I moved out here, I thought I was going to stay in for 20 years. But after I was here for a year, they tried to move me again to New York City. And I was like, I promised my daughters I would never move again. So I said, listen, I'm not going to take that billet, because that's what we call it. I'm not going to take that billet. You're just going to have to let me out my contract, because if you deny your orders, they'll let you out of your contract. You'll still get your honorable discharge. But at that time, Roland, I only had $1,300 in my bank account, you know, and I had my apartment was $1,300 at the time, and my car note was $1,000. So I didn't even have enough. It was like, at that moment, giving up this career. And then it's either, what do you want? You want to live in your car, you want to live in your house. So, but at that moment, it sunk in with me. I cried, I'm not going to lie. I have a daughter who passed away when she was 11 months. And when I made this decision, I went to her gravesite. And I said, Daily, I need you to watch over Daddy. I'm going to do something that's super scary, and I need you to be my guardian angel. And I said, you know what? I'm going to trust the process. So I told them I want to get out. I got out, had $1,300 to my name, and I just started taking a lot of custom orders. And I started taking a lot of orders. And the way my discharge was, it was so bad that because I got a hardship discharge, which I didn't get unemployment. So I didn't even have unemployment to pay my rent. So I literally was living like off of my talent alone. And I said all I needed to do was to last 4 months until I could go to college, because I had the GI Bill, and the GI Bill would pay me, since I live in the Bay Area, it would give me $4,000 a month just to go to school, and it will help me. And the $4,000 is your rent money. So I was like, if I can make it 4 months, I'll be good. I'll be in school, and I won't have to worry about looking for a job. So I actually was able to do that. I was able to maintain, you know, and not be homeless. But I told myself at that moment, I will never, ever live check to check. I will never, ever allow a company or an organization to have this much power over me where I'm crying because I'm a check away from being homeless. You know, so at that moment, I said, no more reckless spending. I started sacrificing. That's one thing people don't do. I started eating and living as if I was poor. Even when I started making money, I would eat top ramen. And then I would only once a week treat myself to like steak or shrimp, you know. And then it came a point where I invented this rubber dye where it could dye like the clear soles of a shoe like this, and it can make it red, yellow, any color, and it wouldn't come out. In 1 month, I made $50,000 off of that dye. And so now I had a $50,000 cushion in my savings account. And from there, I became a religious saver and not just spending money. And I knew from that moment that if I wanted to get a loan from a company to start my own business, that it wouldn't happen because your oppressor is not going to finance your freedom. So I just said, I'm going to keep saving and keep saving, because anything that I want to do and want to achieve is going to have to come off my blood, sweat, and tears, because a bank is not going to give. They'll give me $100,000 school loan, but they're not going to give me a $15,000 business loan. You know, so I recognized that early, and I said, I'm not even going to put myself in that position to beg somebody to help me chase my dream. So I'm glad that I did that. I'm glad that I already knew how to sacrifice, being that I was raised by a single black mother, and I watched her work 3 jobs, you know, sleep only 4 hours a day. So because I seen that, I was already prepared for it unknowingly. So I never even struggled when I had that $1,300. I never had a point after that where I was almost homeless. I was scared because of what I had financially and what was ahead of me, but I never even struggled. And I went, and it took like 2 months, and from there I started making the most money I ever made in my life.
Going through all of that also means that you have to do more than one thing. Look, the reality is same thing when it comes to doing this show. There were people who said, "You got to be crazy. Why won't you go try to go to CNN or MSNBC or try to work at one of these networks?" And I said, I'm not interested in asking somebody else permission. Can I go cover this? But what it also means, though, is that you have to learn different aspects of the business. And I think, to be perfectly honest, Devlin, I think there are a lot of people out there who say they want to be entrepreneurs, who say they want to have their own thing, but don't really understand the level of sacrifice and commitment, where you may have to, may not be able to pay yourself, but pay your staff. I mean, look, I'm in a position right now. I live off of my speeches, and I said, look, we've got to build this thing up. And I try to get people to understand that, yes, there's flexibility, there's freedom, but one of the greatest things about being an entrepreneur is you have to sacrifice. And you have to do more than one thing. And you just can't say, well, we'll just hire somebody else to do it. Now that the money's not there to hire somebody to do it.
You got to learn it. Yeah. So for me, I had to learn how to be my own photographer. I always was good at marketing. Even I graduated from the Fashion Institute for Design and Merchandising in San Fran. And I was elected to be on the elite marketing group because I just knew how to market myself, market any product. So I never had that issue, but I'm also a workaholic, and I probably just like you, I don't like waiting on anybody.
Nope.
For anything.
Nope.
I am very, exactly. I can tell. Like, I'm very impatient. Like, if it's something I want to do, I do it like that. I'm probably one of the only Instagram pages that can post like 4 times a day. And I'm always posting new stuff because I'm constantly working. Like, I'm a father of 4 kids. I have 3 daughters and 1 son. And that's the only thing in the world that means anything to me. I don't care about going out to clubs, meeting people. It's making sure that my kids have a better life than I had. You know, and the sacrifice thing that these people say they want this life, they want to be an entrepreneur. No, they don't. They just look at your page and say, oh, this guy's making some money. I want to do that. But that's not how it works. You actually have, it's so much more work that goes on behind the scene than the pretty pictures and the pretty filters that you see on social media. Like they're not up with me last night when I didn't stop working till 4 in the morning and had to wake up at 6:30 to take my daughters to school and then unload a truck of shoes that just came in a couple of hours ago. You know, they can't do that. Most of these people are lazy. Like this new generation, they're lazy. They want everything handed to them. Everything that I've done is off of my own research. I've learned how to source. I've taken 15-hour flights to China to go and visit factories, walk around the whole country to find the things that I wanted, because I know that the more research that I do, the more possibilities of financial streams I can do. Even if I didn't design clothes right now, I can start my own sourcing company and have people make their own goods, and I can take a percentage as a middleman because of all of the hard work and the legwork that I went through. And that's why when I tell people, it's a smack in the face when you tell a Black-owned brand that their price is too high, or you should give out free stuff because Gucci does that. Well, I'm not Gucci, and I don't have $1 million, $3 million budget just for marketing. See, they don't understand when, for us, like me, if I make $50,000 this month, I have to turn it right back into the company so I can keep the company afloat to keep making things. If I give $10,000 a product away and it doesn't do anything for my business like that, because a lot of these celebrities, they'll take the stuff from you and they'll never post it. And even if they wear it, they won't even tag you in it. You cannot teach business with free stuff. Right. You know, you can't.
Well, look, the reason I fully understand that is because it's like what we do. I mean, I've had people who come to me and they say, man, we would love for you to do your show from our event. And I go, well, you do know that means getting on an airplane, hotel rooms, that means flying staff, we have equipment, we're paying for stuff. And so it's not just, hey, just pop up. No, there's a cost involved. There have been other people who have understood that and they've actually paid us. And then what was also interesting is when you want to do something, then people say, well, why is it that much? Well, because that's actually what it is. And so, I mean, it is a business. And I think that one of the things look, my grandmother had a catering business. And then, I worked in it since I was 7 years old, and I saw how different things work and how I felt she often would undercharge folks as opposed to saying, no, you're going to pay the full freight. And this is why I said, when me and my brother, we took the business over later, this is what I said to him. I said, you know what, if somebody's going to give me $20,000 worth of headaches, they're going to pay me $20,000. Because what's not going to happen, you're not going to give me $20,000 worth of headaches, and you're paying me $5,000, and now I'm mad as hell because I'm dealing with all your BS. And that's just sort of how I operate. And I will tell somebody no, as opposed to go through with that, because, again, I know the work goes in it. I know what I bring to the table. And so, and the other thing is, when you talk about wanting something for free, I keep telling our audience, look, we've been building this show. We've taken our YouTube subs from 170,000 to now more than 350,000 in less than a year. We are averaging, 8 million total views on Facebook, YouTube, and Periscope. But what I tell our audience also is like, look, we are providing the service, but we also need them to be financial supporters of the show, because they can't say, man, we need this, but then don't want to pay for it, because it's like, yo, when you pay that cable bill, you're actually paying CNN. You're paying MSNBC, because they're getting a certain fee per subscriber every time a person turns that cable television on. And so it's just trying to get people to understand that. And I think that's what's critically important.
Yeah, and one thing about, like, what you touched on is, one thing is, people think because they pay you for a service that they own you. And that's the thing we have to get out. Like, for instance, somebody be like, okay, well, I spent $200 on a shoe or something, and they feel like they could talk down to you. They could be like, well, if it was Nike, I would have got it in 2 days. Well, you know what I do? I do the same thing you do. I was like, well, what's your order number? Okay, here you go. Here's your refund. Because one thing about me and the way I was raised under the mom code, which is MOM, morals over money. I will not let you demoralize me for a financial gain. Everything that I'm doing, I love that I do it by myself, because I don't have to deal with the BS. When you're in the military, you cannot not deal with the BS, because if somebody outranks you, they talk to you how they want. They try, but they'll try to talk to you how they want to, because they know they outrank you and you have to listen to them.
Right.
And because of that, I didn't leave a career to be a free man in a sense, to have you treat me the same way that I did not like to be treated already, just because you spent a little bit of money. You know, I'd rather not have your money. It's like you said, I'd rather not deal with the headache. You know what I'm saying? Because there's so much more people who appreciate it and respect it. The thing is, between us and people of color, we have to start seeing value in our own skin, in those relationships. You know, like on the Breakfast Club, I said that, you know, the biggest threat to Black-owned businesses and stuff is Black people. We're always so quick to say we need this, we need that, but then we don't pay for it. You know, like you see a show like yours. Like I'm sure you probably have a Patreon or something where people can donate money.
Yeah.
You know, it's people who probably watch your show every day and they never put money in your Patreon account when they could put $2 a month. That $2 a month from 100,000 people, that's enough to keep you going.
No, you're absolutely
and pay
right.
your staff and even get better equipment.
Yep.
But they don't understand that independence. Like $2 is nothing. As much garbage I buy, like $2 is nothing. If you are watching something like me, I watch your show from time to time when I'm shipping orders, and I'm going to start paying into your Patreon, because I'm not just going to be about it. I'm not just going to talk about it. I'm actually be about it, because it is true. We don't know. And for some of us who are watching right now, they may not know, like, oh man, you know, I never thought about it. You know, Roland Martin's 100% independent. I should start paying. If we could pay for Netflix and Hulu and all those other things, why can't we pay for our own brother to give us the truth, the type of media coverage that we do not get? You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
We have to start supporting those things, and because our people, we are the only racial group that does not believe in group economics.
And it's interesting.
And we're like the number one shoppers.
And it's interesting.
We're the number one consumers of everything, but we don't
Right.
believe in group economics.
You made that point. I've been saying that for years. And so, for instance, there are numerous times when I go into Black-owned businesses, restaurants, and things along those lines. I remember I was at Two Partners in barbecue place in Dallas, and the brother who owned, he said, "No, Roland, I got it." I said, "No." I said, "I'm gonna pay for it." I said, because the reality is that plate, that fork. I said, you got employees. I said, I'm gonna pay for it. I said, no problem whatsoever. And then people who will say, "Wait, no, hold up, how, you got free? If somebody's giving you something for free," I said, "No, what you don't understand is," I said, that brother has a business. And what I try to get people to understand is that when just like for you, I'm sure the people who come to go to your site and they're like, "Well, why is it this much?" Guess what? When they walk into Walmart, or when they go to Macy's, or they go to Saks Fifth Avenue, they don't ask the question, "How much is it?" They say, "What the tag say?" And then if there's no tag, they'll scan something and they say, "This is what it is." And so my deal is, I'm right there with you. We've got to stop looking for the hookup with Black-owned businesses and understand that they are a business just like any other business. Last question for you. How did just very curious, obviously the Breakfast Club has a huge platform. How did that change your business? The people all of a sudden started hitting you up because they finally, some people say, "Man, just like me, I didn't realize you existed." It was like, "Yo, I gotta get this brother on." And so, what was the reaction? What was the fallout from it?
So my FBCC page, I had 148,000 followers. I have like 185,000 now. My clothing line page, the Sia Collective, went from 30,000 to 85,000. The funny thing is, though, I get messages now. Some guy DM me a few. "Hey man, I seen you at the Breakfast Club. Super inspirational. I've been following your page for years. You know what? I'm gonna go buy something." I'm like, I didn't even respond to him. I'm like, "You've been following me for years. You've been seeing the hard work I've been putting in. You didn't want to buy nothing until I was on the Breakfast Club." So the Breakfast Club is what made you be like,
They validated you.
You legit now. Like, I've been legit for the last 5 years killing stuff. But because I'm on the Breakfast Club, now you want to spend some money with me. Like, you've been following my page for 5 years. You done seen me go through struggles. You done seen me keep consistently bringing this. You done seen me do free programs for the kids. I teach young kids and children of color how to sew for free. I teach them how to do fashion design, and I don't charge the parents. And the sad part is most of those parents don't even come back to the store and even buy a t-shirt. I feed their kids. I told them, I don't want no money from you. I take their kids on field trips, and this is all on my own dime because nobody did this for me. And one thing that I want to be a part of the change. I want to spark that change behind me. Those young kids coming up, maybe one day they'll be a big fashion designer. They'll be like, "Hey man, Delvin Carter was my teacher. He taught me when I was 8 years old.
There
now
you go.
look at what I'm doing." You know, it's crazy, but the Breakfast Club definitely brought a lot. But the good thing about the Breakfast Club is I get celebrities hitting me up now, and they're like, "Yo, I love your stuff, and I don't want it for free. I want to pay for it." You know, so at least I'm getting. Like I had Shaq hit me up last night, so I'm working on a shoe for Shaq. He's like, "Hey man, I want you to make me some shoes. I buy in bulk. I don't want it cheap, but can you make a size 22?" I was like, I hit my factory up. I said, "Hey, can we make?" He wants like this shoe right here. I was like, "Can we make a size 22 in this sole?" He was like, "Yeah, we could make it." So right now we're working on, you know, making Shaq his own shoes of my shoe, which is crazy for an independent company to be able to make a damn size 22 shoe for Shaq. But
Love
he's
it.
real cool. He's like, "Man, I don't want no discounts, man, and I want 20 pairs of each." You know, so that
Man.
was a blessing.
Hey, that's what I'm saying. So again, congrats. Tell people, give people the website again.
Okay, so the website is SIACOLLECTIVE.com. That's Sia Collective, which stands for Somewhere in America. And I have my own app where you can shop on the app, and it's called Somewhere in America. That's the app, and the page is Sia Collective. So SIA_collective at that's at Instagram. So that's the Instagram handle in FBCC Bay Area.
And you're based where you based?
I'm based in the Bay Area, California, but I'm from Brooklyn, New York.
Okay, well, hopefully when I get to the Bay Area, our paths will cross. Devlin, I appreciate it, man. Thanks a lot and good luck.
All right, thank you, man. Appreciate you having me on, man. Stay blessed and keep doing what you're doing. I'm a huge fan, and I'm going to donate to that Patreon.
And I'll definitely be going to, well, actually, we have it set up where we don't even use Patreon. Go right to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. And so I definitely will download your app and check the stuff out and pick up a couple of things. I appreciate it, brother. You take care.
All right, you too, brother.
All right. All right, family, it's almost time. The holiday season is my favorite time of the year. And whether you celebrate Thanksgiving, Ramadan, Christmas, Kwanzaa, or New Year's, this is when you think about spending time with the people you love most. This is also the time to count your blessings and support those less fortunate and look at how you can have an impact on their lives. Well, I have the perfect opportunity for you to be a holiday hero and have a major impact on other families. Now, here's the deal. Right now, hundreds of thousands of Americans are sitting in jail without being convicted of a crime. Why? Because they lack the financial resources to pay their bail. Now, think about it. If you are arrested for any minor offense, you'll be taken directly to jail. And if you don't have bail money, whether it's a few hundred or a few $1,000s, you will stay there until a court date is scheduled. That could be days, weeks, or even months. Now, America's bail system is broken and has created a two-tier system of justice, one for the rich and another for the poor. Folks, freedom should be free. And that's why the Ebony Foundation has partnered with the Bail Project and is sponsoring the Home by the Holiday campaign. Now, with your help, the goal is to bail out 1,000 people by New Year's Day. Now, a donation from you today can change someone's life tomorrow. And this is critical because people of color represent upwards of 90% of the jail population across the country. Now, when folks stay in jail, 90% of the people with misdemeanors end up pleading guilty because they want to get out of jail. However, when bail was paid, 50% of the cases were dismissed, and less than 2% received a jail sentence. Sometimes justice needs just us. To join the fight to be a holiday hero, you can donate $25, $50 or more to help the Ebony Foundation bring our brothers and sisters home by the holiday. To donate, go to homebytheholiday.com. That's homebytheholiday.com. Please support them now. All right, Sally, glad to have you here. Let's get right into it. Your book is called The Opposite of Hate, a field guide to repairing our humanity. But the reality is we're living in a time where folks are operating on polar opposites. When you look at the language emanating from the White House, attacks on undocumented workers, when you look at just every form of criticism, it is as if we are in a death match every time there's a conversation.
As per usual, Roland, I couldn't have said it better myself, and nice to see you. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. If it gives anyone comfort, this may not be the worst, ugliest, nastiest moment in human or certainly in United States history, right? We are a country that, as we all know, or at least as your viewers, you and your viewers know, was founded on hate, obviously the genocide of Native people founded on and built on enslaving Africans. And this isn't like we've fought tooth and nail, community by community by community, decade by decade by decade ever since, just to give even little bits of progress toward humanity, towards group after group after group. So unfortunately, this kind of animosity, this kind of us versus them, this kind of deep hate and resentment is part and parcel of who we seem to be as a nation. And at the same time, that's never stopped us from fighting against it and demanding that we do better, learn better, act better, be better, to borrow from Melania Trump, ironically. And I continue to hold out hope, at least, that our side of the equation can hold the country's feet to the fire.
But one of the things that jumps out, I mean, you have a chapter called Why We Hate the Trolls, and you talk about when you worked at Fox News and how folks are off camera. And the reality is, I believe, especially when you talk about conservative radio and a lot of the folks on Fox News, that they know this is a game. And the reality is they're playing a game. The problem is it's a dangerous game because the people who are listening to that every single day. I don't think people, look, I'm born and raised in Texas. I don't think people understand when you go to Texas and Louisiana and you go to Arkansas, you go to all those red states. I mean, you are bombarded with the same messaging every single day on 5 and 6 talk radio stations, and they watch Fox News all day, and that's all they hear.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, listen, I don't think we should we don't have to sort of over-characterize the dangers of rhetoric and speech, right? Like, I don't think that, we live in a free society where we allow free speech, even hate speech, for better or for worse, and that's part of our democracy and part of what we've always believed as a country. And what I certainly believe is that the answer to bad speech is more speech, is good speech, is positive speech, constructive speech, speech that corrects wrongs and rights our country and our values. And at the same time, all we have to do is look at, you're talking about Fox is certainly one problem. The president is obviously a problem. At his own rally this week, he's attacking the media live right there. And one of his supporters turns and attacks a BBC cameraman. I mean, there are direct consequences, and you're exactly right. I don't want to give too much credit to Trump. I don't know if he knows what he's doing or he doesn't know what he's doing, but he damn well should. And it's reckless, it's irresponsible, and increasingly it's very, very dangerous.
And one of the things that I wish we could have is, I think back to the 60s. And the other day I was watching several documentaries, and I Am Not Your Negro, James Baldwin. I was watching something on Malcolm X as well. People don't understand. You had shows like Dick Cavett, and you had other shows that were talk shows, but you had real vigorous debate. Malcolm X, we talk about Muhammad Ali and Nikki Giovanni, when you had Gore Vidal and William Buckley, and you had, James Baldwin and these debates. You had real conversations, debates. They weren't strangling each other. They weren't saying, cut your mic off. And you really had these thought-provoking debates. And I think part of the problem today, when we talk about this level of hate, is that we have people who are playing to the cheap seats, and they really don't want vigorous debate. They really don't want to be challenged by folks from the other side. And I talk about all the time, it's amazing how all these Fox News shows are scared to even call me, and I'm going, okay, you want to debate? Let's go. But it's a game, and it's a financial game. It's a ratings game. And it's not a quest for true information. It's really, how much money can we make?
Well, you want to go make the deeper cut here. The truth is, again, it's not just Fox. And listen, I think it's so easy to point out the hate and the hypocrisy and the nastiness and the cruelty and the bias and the bigotry on the right and the far right and the Fox and the Trump and the whatever, and I'll continue to do it till the cows come home. It's bad, it's abominable, and it's worse than almost anything else we can point to. And let's not let everybody off the hook, including our side, right? So, why don't we see exactly what you're talking about, Roland, on MSNBC or CNN for that matter, or on network television.
Because
right?
I think it goes back to the game. I think unfortunately what has happened, and it really is, and for those of us who study this medium, look, there was a time when news was not a profit generator. Okay, it wasn't. I mean, it was about the public good. But I think what has happened is we've turned media now into infotainment, into entertainment, and we're getting away from how can we discuss the issues. I don't give a damn if Senator Kirsten Gillibrand ate fried chicken with her fingers or with a fork. I really don't. Okay, what was she there talking about in South Carolina? And I think that's also what generates this hate because see, there you go, and as opposed to what did she say?
Yeah.
What did she talk about?
Or even more consequentially, let's unpack the policies and the implications and discuss them and do so in a way without ad hominem attacks. I mean, you're right. Look, we are becoming a very Twitterified country, right? Where the tail's wagging the dog because of deregulation, because of competition, because of profit motives. You're talking about increasingly you have a news media that is, look, I'm not actually besmirching their intent. Like, I think they want to get it right. They want to be factual. They want to be accurate. They want to be, but the pressure to be entertaining and to be fast,
right,
often gets in the way. And to like competing with Twitter, it's like, which dumpster can get set on fire faster? Like, you don't want to be playing that game. You want to actually have measured, take some time and not just be, going after the cat fight on whatever on Twitter.
You know what, Sally? Someone sent me a text last night, and as an African American, he asked me. He said, "Would you love to return to cable news?" And I said, "No." He's like, "Are you serious?" I said, "Bruh," I said, "I'm being very honest with you." I said, when I was at CNN for 6 years, 2007, 2013, I said, I've been gone 6 years. I said, that doesn't exist anymore. Oh, no, we had debates and arguments, and there were moments where we went viral. But I think that what you just said there, that what also I think drives this is that there is such a need to go viral with things, and the clickbait and how many views do we get, that also plays into this whole hate thing, because then it has to be, I must attack you, I must denigrate you, I must tear you up. I tweeted the other day, I'm sick in music. I don't want to hear about Nicki Minaj and Cardi B or Remy Ma. You know what? Why can't there just be 3 female rappers who are great at one time? Like, it wasn't like, oh my God, Luther Vandross must hate Freddie Jackson, and then they must hate Jeffrey Osborne, and they must hate James Ingram. Yo, it's more folks in this game, and I think, and then what happens is the person at home is like, see, oh my God, you must hate their guts. I know people come up to you and probably say, oh, you must hate when you're debating one of the conservatives. You're like, no, actually, so-and-so's fine. We just have disagreements.
Well, but that's the other thing is, to your point, even just looking about sort of celebrity culture, right? The only thing that gets attention right now in our society, in news media and entertainment media, is beef. That's it. So someone has to say something or do something that offends somebody else, and that's how people get attention. And that's what's amplified on social media, and that's what's amplified then in the news media. And there's so much depressing about that, including the fact that then it incentivizes people to be hypercritical of each other and make up these dramatic spats in order to get attention, whatever. And also, we're not paying attention to the good stuff, right? I mean, I don't know if you saw this, but like today, Ilhan Omar did an amazing job of calling out Iran-Contra, like convicted liar Elliot Abrams,
right,
during congressional testimony. But like, what led up to that? Like, if we unpack it for a second, as she's going into that hearing, the press is attacking her, inundating her, asking her questions about her tweets that she already apologized for. So whatever, move on. And that's all they want to talk about. Then she gets in there, and the only reason, right, that we're even talking about it here, that is because it went viral, because she, attacked him, which, by the way, she should have. But the media now is going to cover that because of this beefy moment when they should have been talking about that all along.
Right.
It is infinitely more important to the past and present of our country than a couple of her, ill-conceived tweets. Like, come on. We are so losing the forest through the trees.
What about this issue? So when you talk about this opposite of hate, again, trying to repair humanity, I'm working on a book called White Fear. And when I look at what's happening right now, when I look at, when you look at Trump launching his campaign and targeting Mexicans, and they rape and they do all these different things, when you hear him in the language, and then you see the attacks, and then there's this whole deal of, taking our country back. The reality is we're 25 years away from being a nation that's majority people of color. And when I look at Charlottesville, when I look at the FBI just the other day taking down 54 white supremacists in Arkansas, when I think about a man going to in Kentucky and killing a black couple, when you think about Dylan Roof, when you think about all these different things, I also believe that what we are facing this white fear that, oh my God, the America that we have known but also controlled is one that we now are not going to be able to control. We've got to now share. We've now got to work with other people. And I think that is something that is there. The media is afraid to deal with it because I think part of the problem is the media, you have largely white male executives who also don't want to have to confront their issues with race. And I think all is working together that also deals with this issue of hate. Not the same hate as lynching, not the same hate as burning crosses, but it emanates out of the same DNA.
Yeah, I know, and I appreciate you making that point because too often people will try to distinguish them, and they spring from the same well. I think you're exactly right. I would go even further. The media doesn't, in fact, talk about this in the way you're talking about it. What the media does is they kind of coddle and make excuses for these white folk, right? Like, oh, but let's understand, like, oh, poor them. It's so much change, and it's so much, and that's not constructive, and that's not helpful.
Economic anxiety. Like black people don't have that.
And the truth is, even when we do talk about it, we don't talk about it with enough of a historical understanding, which is to say, and I'm not making excuses. Yeah, I think we have to always understand. And what's hard is we tend to, as a country, see things in very hyper individualistic terms. It's part of the nature of our history. It's part of the, whatever. And we have a hard time talking in systemic and structural terms. And the fact is that kind of white fear you're talking about has been deliberately stoked and manipulated by political forces for 60 plus years. That was a very deliberate strategy to get people to vote occasionally for Democrats. Bill Clinton did it, but mostly for Republicans, right? It was Goldwater and George Wallace and Nixon and Reagan and now, of course, Trump, borrowing from the same playbook of stoking fear and racial resentment in order to gin up votes. And when you have a long-term strategy like that, this is what you get. This is what you get. This is what you produce in a country that arguably was already ripe for it. So it's that interplay, I think. And yes, we don't, I don't know. We're too busy talking about Twitter beefs, I guess.
As you travel the country, what have you heard from people in terms of solutions? People who have said, you know what, at some point we have to deal with this. And so how do, from your perspective, we move beyond this and only being embroiled in just the contentious back and forth?
That's a lovely question, because yet another thing we don't spend enough time talking about in the mainstream media or on social media. And, look, there have been occasional examples of people who have been transformed, dynamic situations that have been transformed through social media or through media. But I will tell you, by and large, most of the stories that I've encountered, whether it's, neo-Nazis who left lives of hate and renounced racism, whether it's, former terrorists who renounced hate, or just people who worked on their bigotries and blind spots and biases, had to do with interpersonal connection, interpersonal interaction.
Yep.
The truth is 3/4 of white Americans say they don't know anyone who's not white. 53% of Americans say they don't know anyone who's Muslim. Most, strong Republicans don't know any strong Democrats, and vice versa. And so the most moving stories have been like work I encountered in Nashville, Tennessee, where there was a group of mostly white evangelical Christian ministers who were hearing from their mostly would-be Trump supporter, base or congregation. They were hearing all these very anti-Muslim sentiments. And these leaders knew that was wrong. They knew that was unchristian, but they didn't know enough to directly respond. And so they called up the Muslim community organization in Nashville, teeny tiny little organization. They said, help us. And so they ended up having a retreat where Muslim imams and Muslim community leaders and these evangelical Christian leaders came together, and they talked about scripture, and they learned about each other's beliefs and faith. And they also just got to know each other as people and talked about movies and raising their kids and all that. And now they have a program where they do that with the congregants across the community of Nashville, where people are opening their homes,
right.
Non-Muslims are opening their homes, and Muslim community leaders go and they break bread together and they ask questions and they have conversations and they get to know each other as people. And it sucks that we have to do it in a kind of artificial way, but that's sometimes what we have to do. We have to actually know the people who we are believing all these stereotypes and ideas and myths and lies and hate about.
Well, yeah, I mean, but the reality is the only reason you saw a dramatic shift in the issue of same-sex marriage is when you had individuals who said, oh, damn, I actually know somebody who's gay. I mean, for a Dick Cheney, even though he was silent when he was vice president, him having a daughter who was a lesbian was different. And that it causes people, again, to have to look at it differently. And I think one of the things that I say in my speeches all the time is that what we have to recognize when you talk about this idea of the opposite of hate is that we actually, and of course in your last chapter it's called Systems of Hate, is that really work and school are in essence what I call involuntary places. You really don't control who's there. Now, right, you might move into a neighborhood that's all white, and so yes, your parents are having control over that, but for the most part you don't control that. What I then say is, what happens then when it's voluntary? Who do we go to lunch with? Who do we go to dinner with? Where do we go to church? So when you start making those decisions, to your point earlier, that's really where you see, oh, I think I'm living in a diverse world, but the reality is my world is really all white and all black and all Latino environment and all white conservative evangelical, all black church environment. And we have to actually force people out of their comfort zones. And I think when you talk about systems of hate, I think that this is going to require people, leaders, to say this is not an option. When John LeGrand, who runs FX, when he said, wait a minute, 80+% of our showrunners are white males. That's not America. He makes an edict. 6 months later, it was flipped where half.
Yeah.
When Al Newharth ran Gannett, he said, we are going to have a diverse media company, and I'm going to tie your bonuses to it. And there were people who objected. He said, you are happy to leave the company. And it's going to take CEOs and superintendents and presidents and mayors and governors and pastors and you name it to say, no, this is not an option, because leaders actually are the ones who change systems.
Yes. Yes, no, exactly right. And it also takes us, the people, demanding that kind of leadership, paving the way for that kind of leadership. And by the way, making leaderful choices in our own lives about where we live, where we send our kids to school, who we hire. Like we make what books we read. I mean, right? We all make big and small choices and decisions that either expand our world or isolate our world. And, you know, to your point, by the way, it is also noteworthy when we talk about systems of hate, systems of exclusion and discrimination, that a lot of those choices are made for people, right? When we look at patterns of housing discrimination, lending discrimination, how that then feeds into schools, and the fact that, yes, we have made progress, thankfully, as a country, and our schools today are more segregated than they were 20 years ago. That is the kind of systemic factor that then is going to entrench hate further as opposed to moving us away from it. So I completely agree. This is why it's important to hire and have diverse and inclusive communities at work, not just because it's like the morally right thing to do, but because that's part of the way and part of one of the places that people get to interact with people who are not like them. And that is good for our society.
Well, and for me, again, going back to when I was asked the question, hey, would you love to return to cable news? And I said, one of the reasons not, I said, because, let me just be honest. I control the show. I control the guest. I control the topic. I said, I'm not chasing what everybody else had on. When I had my Sunday morning show, Washington Watch, my producer would say, hey, this is what today's show, this is what Meet the Press and Face the Nation did. I went, I don't care. I don't watch them. I'm not going to make.
They must have loved you.
No, I mean, but I was managing editor. It didn't matter. Because the deal is, I'm not going to make choices based upon what they did. And I really don't. I don't care. I don't look at MSNBC, CNN, Fox News to go, what was their lead story? Because it doesn't matter. My whole deal is we have to be able to give folks a different view and perspective at different stories in a different way. And the only way you do that is if you also control the product. And is it a personal sacrifice? Yes. Is it, does it impact financially? Yes. Is it more work? Yes. But I think that's, again, going back to your last chapter, systems of hate, you have to have alternatives when you talk about these systems, because now you're able to offer a different point of view, and somebody can say, you know what, I'm tired of seeing and hearing the same thing. Let me go see what Roland is saying. Whoa, I'm getting a totally different. I've had white folks to go, dude, I've learned so much on your show because you introduced stuff I had no clue about. I had white staffers on my last show said the same thing.
True.
When we had last show, they said, man, they literally said, I hate to see this thing. I had white staffers who said they were crying when the show ended because they said, the stuff I learned every day, I never knew in my life.
No, it's true. Listen, I mean, I have to tell you, every time I tune in, which is more often than you'd think, it's some of the most rich, substantive, and like nuanced. I'm old-fashioned. I still believe in nuance. So I'm grateful you're doing what you're doing. I'm supremely grateful for you having me on. And for the sake of your sanity, which I'm personally invested in, I'm glad you won't go back to cable news.
But no, because again, it's just the same old thing drives me crazy. Last question. I ask every book author this.
Yeah.
Every book author, I ask them the same question. What was your wow moment researching and writing this book? So what was that one thing where even you went, wow, that's crazy, or that's wild?
Well, oh my gosh. It's a great question. I love that. I had a lot of them. I think I really did have a lot of them, and thankfully got to put most of them in the book. The one that probably gutted me the most is that when I was preparing to reading and to go to Rwanda, because it's obviously the site of one of the most recent genocides in world history, and one of the absolute fastest, and also one of the most interpersonal, sort of close, where people were really, really, truly were killing their friends and their families. And nothing can prepare you for that. But I was trying, and I talked to a philosopher who has studied genocides for her entire life, and she said, the reason we call them mass atrocities isn't because like a handful of people participated, right? There weren't enough. The truth is there just aren't enough psychopaths, right? In Rwanda or in Nazi Germany or in Armenia or wherever. There aren't enough to have such like the reason they're called mass atrocity is because masses of people participated in them. And that gutted me, because it's true,
yep.
right? And that we think that the thing is, we think that we couldn't do that.
Right.
Right. But we're no different. We're no different from the people at various points in history who have done atrocious and awful things or thought atrocious and awful things, including, by the way, the people in this country. And that there's a comfort in wanting to think that only evil people do evil things.
Yep.
And when you remove that comfort, you really have to confront, honestly, the evil in your own heart and mind and history and unconscious and conscious, and really start to address that and be accountable for that and confront that. And I think that is hard, but ultimately the only way we all move forward.
Folks, the book is called The Opposite of Hate, A Field Guide to Repairing Our Humanity by Sally Kohn. Sally, appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Great job writing this, and hopefully folks will learn from it and understand that there is a path to having a different America. It does not have to be the same one that we've had all these centuries.
Thank God, no. Roland, honored, blessed. Thank you.
Thanks so much. You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it. Hey folks, joining me right now, Isha Sesay. She is the author of the book Beneath the Tamarind Tree, a story of courage, family, and the law school girls of Boko Haram. What up?
What up?
All chilling. What you up to?
Well, you know, writing a book, popping in to see you, dealing with you and your ways.
Okay, whatever. First of all, you need to understand, I had to deal with Isha when we were both at CNN. She was CNN International. Of course, I was on CNN. And it wasn't much flavor on CNN International.
You're not going to play that card.
It wasn't much flavor.
No, you're
and
not
so, so whenever I was on, she knew, first of all, ratings spiked.
First of all,
and she
we didn't
knew,
have ratings.
and she
that was
knew
part of the issue.
you did have ratings. And then she also knew that that when I came on, other folks were like, that's right.
You brought the funk.
That's right.
You brought the funk.
That's how we do it.
And then I had to be like, rap.
No, you didn't.
It's a rap.
You were like, another segment, another segment, another segment.
How long has it been? 10 years? I known you that long?
2007, so it'll be 12 years. I joined CNN in 2000.
You're looking every...
I joined in 2007.
Wow. You know, the years have been kind.
What you just
No, I was
said?
going to say the years have been kind to you. And it's good.
Don't get cut. Don't get cut. 'Cause I can cut this interview. See? Uh-huh.
Are you really going to power trip? Let's talk about my book.
I can do that.
Oh, God.
What does that say? Matter of fact, just read the shirt. See, I wore the shirt today. This is the first time I've worn the shirt, just to remind you. But first of all, I rolled this way when I was on your show.
You did. You came into my house, so to speak, and you rolled this way.
And did the damn thing.
It's true. It's true. Yeah.
Where are you now? You in Atlanta? Are you in L.A.? Are you living somewhere else? Are you in London?
I am in L.A. I am in L.A.
What the hell are you doing in L.A.? What are you doing?
So I finished the book. My plan is to turn this into a film or limited TV series, because I believe the world needs to have as many access points to the story as possible. Plus, you know, it's made for a dramatic telling on screen. Also, I might be joining you in this kind of digital space soon.
Really?
Really, I might be. And also working on a scripted series.
Cool.
So yeah,
Sound like a little busy.
Yeah, and I also have a charity. I have a charity, an NGO working in West Africa and Sierra Leone, where I'm originally from, with hundreds of girls, almost 600 girls, leadership development.
Born there?
Born in London.
Born in London.
But spent my formative years in Sierra Leone.
That's where your people from.
That's where my people are from.
Right, that's how we normally say, not where you're from. Where your people from?
My people are from Sierra Leone, West Africa, and, you know, again, part of why I want to write the story is because my people are from a part of the world that's incredibly poor, incredibly neglected, and it was education that led to me sitting talking to you.
When we talk about what happened with, I remember this story vividly because, like most stories that come out of the continent of Africa, it's not like other media, especially Western media, really gives a damn. you will have coverage from the BBC and others, but frankly, in the United States, I mean, it has to rise to a certain level for it to finally get some attention in the United States, and it did after a long period of time.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, this story was a complicated one because where it happened was so remote in Nigeria, corner of northeastern Nigeria, and to be honest, even the Nigerian government really did its best. You know, the government at the time, the president was Goodluck Jonathan, to kind of keep it tamped down. So there was effectively an information blackout. So it took a minute. It took a couple of weeks before it really kind of broke through that nothing was as it seemed. And then, of course, even though Nigerians were leading the rally on the ground to ask for more information, it's when celebrities in the West picked it up that it became an international.
So you also have members of Congress, folks like Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, Frederica Wilson, and others who continue to speak to the issue.
Absolutely, and they've got to, because there are 112 girls missing. So this story
112 still missing.
Still missing.
Well, what was the total number of girls that they kidnapped?
So the night itself, when they gathered them all up and put them in vehicles and made them walk into the forest, they took 276 girls.
Gotcha.
219 disappeared because 57 of that number escaped in the hours afterwards. But it was really 219 that disappeared for years, basically. And of that 219, only 107 are back. So over 100 girls are still missing. And my thing is, Roland.
And how long has it been?
5+ years.
Wow.
April 14th, 2014 is when it happened. And the thing is, you know, and I say this, and this is not to take away from the pain of any family that's lost a child, but, you know, there's still a spotlight on JonBenet Ramsey, that little girl who was found murdered, you know, 2 decades ago. There's still a spotlight on Natalie Holloway, the girl who got, you know, who went missing in Aruba, and Madeleine McCann, the little toddler. When it's...
Operative here, white women, white girls.
Listen, and when you see it happen over and over again, and listen, I don't begrudge the attention their families got, not at all. It's horrific to lose your child. But these children matter as well. And the fact that it's been 5+ years and nobody even brings it up, there's almost a kind of, oh, it's Africa, bad things happen in Africa all the time, so.
Yeah, but also, but it's not even just Africa, because the reality is, if you're a black woman in the United States, I mean, the only way it rises to that level, it has to take protest. It's weeks later when we all know the immediate.
Can we talk about R. Kelly?
The first 48, 72 hours
Can we talk about
the most. Well, but not even R. Kelly. I'm just talking about.
Yeah, but R. Kelly is perhaps the closest to this in the sense that this was something that happened, and years upon years upon years, everybody knew.
No. I'm talking about right now. I'm talking about. I've had the Black and Missing Foundation folks on.
Absolutely.
And black women, when they come up missing, and I call folks out. When I was at the Fort Worth Star Telegram, my second job in the industry, when I was at CNN, I'm like, because here's the reality. When a white girl comes up missing or is murdered, our industry are made up of largely white men. And if the executives are not white men, they're white women. And so when it happens, they see their daughters, their nieces, their cousins, their aunts, their sisters.
Yeah, absolutely. Real
when
talk.
It's us, I don't know them.
Well, I mean, this comes back again to representation, why we have to be at the table. This is why we have to be at the table. We have to be in these organizations. We have to be across the board.
In leadership positions.
In leadership positions. Because until that happens, until we are in control of telling our own stories, which is why I'm writing this book, then you get a story which affects, you know, or at the heart of it is a person of color, and it only rises to attention for a minute.
Did you have issues trying to keep the spotlight on these girls when you were at CNN International?
You know, I think that the interest when it sparked, CNN led the way. We led the way. We dragged the world's attention to this. You know, I'm proud of the work I did with my colleagues. We won a Peabody for it. CNN was committed to the story. I think where I became disheartened was when the 21 came out, and I write about this in the book. When the 21 came out, it was October 13th, 2016. We were now
2 years after.
2 years after, just almost 2.5 years after. We're creeping up to the presidential election between, you know, Hillary and Trump, and there was just barely any interest. I got on the plane. They did let me go, but I remember thinking when I'd met them, I was the first journalist to get even remotely close to them, and there just wasn't any interest in exploring it. It was just minimal interest. And you kind of just realize that it just, you know, when it was the tragedy, when it was, as you say, the level of when it was something so awful, the girls were missing and we could talk about their abduction, there was an interest. But when there was almost like a good news story almost, it's almost like they didn't feel it.
Okay, which dovetails with this whole notion that, yes, when it's misery,
exactly,
when it's pain, when it's
exactly,
agony, oh, but the spotlight.
Yes.
But frankly,
yes.
as some folks would say here, when it's positive news, then it's not interesting.
Yeah.
So in essence, what media loves, what mainstream media loves, they love black pathology.
They're more readily drawn to it. They're more readily drawn to the theater of it. And that was more ready to get eyeballs and to have people committed to it. I mean, I talked about this, and the one thing I'll say about CNN, I criticized the Ebola coverage, that came out of Western organizations, at its height in 2013, 2014, 2015, because there was no interest in that story, despite the fact that thousands were dying across the continent until those 2 American medics were affected in Liberia. And then when they showed Africans, it was at our worst, at our most just unable to contain whatever was in our bodies, whether we were half clothed, whether we had been stripped of our dignity, and those pictures were put on the air. And that, and I said openly, and you know what? CNN said, it came out over social media that I'd, criticized the coverage, and they put me on the air to say it, and to say, we should care about the humanity of the people on that continent. I'm still working on that. That's what this book is about, trying to humanize these girls.
But you also deal with the reality of a Nigerian government that was porous in its response and its unwillingness to accept outside help.
Yeah, and that's the truth. I mean, listen, the government at the time of Goodluck Jonathan, didn't say anything publicly on this for almost 3 weeks. The president didn't speak out. The day after the girls went missing, he was at a rally dancing and doing a political campaign for somebody. The government has taken issue with the fact that I have said that they don't care, or the last regime didn't care, and this current regime hasn't done a whole lot better in its treatment of the families of the missing girls, the 112, because they're poor. I've said that over and over again because I know how Nigeria operates, and other Nigerians that I've spoken to, many, many Nigerians say, if these girls had had famous last names, the entire machinery of the state would have been activated to do something.
But in essence, they were poor.
They were not just poor, they were poor from a Muslim part of the country. So the Christian president at the time, because Nigeria is riven by that Muslim-Christian tension, basically his people around him, and even his wife, who came out and said there were no girls taken, basically was like, this is a hoax. I mean, Vladimir Duterte, who you may remember, was a correspondent at CNN at the time on this story in Nigeria. And we were on the podcast for CBS a couple of days ago, and he said the first time he heard the term fake news wasn't in the US, was on this story, because the Nigerian government said, this is a fake story. People he was dealing with in the authorities said, this isn't true. And there's still that strain of denial. I have met parents who sat and wept and showed me pictures of their children. I have met children who've escaped. I tell their stories. And people still say, some people in Nigeria say, this never happened.
You also had to deal with this reality, which is also why people were saying, why did the United States intervene? Boko Haram, terrorist organization.
Yeah.
So here we are. We would at that time. You were dealing with Al Qaeda.
Yeah.
You're talking about ISIS. You're talking about Boko Haram. And folks here were saying, wait a minute, U.S. If you supposedly had this international war on terror,
and this is...
Here you go.
Here you go. And I say, and I write in the book that, the fact that these men were able to storm this school and take all of these girls is a flare to illuminate a problem of security and stability in the region. If you're able to pull something like this off, it tells you that there's something very, very wrong, and that there's a vacuum of leadership. In vacuums, in spaces like this, where you're dealing with terrorist elements in and around, they tend to take root. We saw that in Afghanistan. where there was a vacuum and Osama bin Laden slipped in. We saw that in Yemen, where Anwar al-Awlaki slipped in and then managed to get that Nigerian school kid to make his way to Yemen, where he trained him and he tried to bring down a plane over Detroit. The US and people today should still pay attention to this story, because northeastern Nigeria isn't getting any more stable. Not only that, Boko Haram splintered in 2016 and a faction aligned itself directly with ISIS. So now you have this African group aligned with ISIS. You have ISIS on the run from Iraq and Syria. They don't have a place to be. Where are they going to go? The chances are, unfortunately, they may take root or deeper root in places in West Africa. And what might happen if they take root in those places? If they plot, who might they plot against? We should all pay attention to this.
The other thing that I think is also important for folks to understand, the significance of Nigerian oil to the U.S.
Nigeria is a major oil supplier. Not only that, it's a major trading partner worth billions between the U.S. and to the U.S. The U.S. is one of the largest exporters to Nigeria, sub-Saharan Africa. Not only that, Nigeria is the critical partner for the U.S. in its war against terror. So this didn't just happen to some, in some faraway land that we can roll our eyes and shrug and go back to sleep. We should pay attention. And, I say in the book, pay attention. If you don't want to pay attention because you think these girls' lives matter, pay attention for national security reasons.
And I think, again, that's where this sort of ambivalence was, people were saying, is because the U.S. was going, because of our relationship, we really don't want to really intervene in those
And the
affairs.
Nigerians didn't want them intervening as well.
Right, right. But the flip side, though, is that had the United States been far more aggressive in making it clear, y'all need to deal with this, that level of pressure plays an important part when you're dealing with somebody who's a major trading and oil partner.
Yeah. And also, again, the Nigerian government, whether it's Human Rights Watch or Amnesty, has widely criticized the Nigerian government for the way it's fought the war against Boko Haram and has detailed in its reports crimes against humanity, war crimes in the way they've prosecuted it, and what they say are innocent bystanders being caught up in it. So, the U.S., was aware of what they were dealing with, and they understood, what was at stake. And I think they too quickly moved on. We're
dealing with a situation where we're 24 years away in the United States of America becoming a nation majority people of color. We are looking at the reality of 7 of the 10 fastest growing world economies are African nations.
That's right.
And so for decades, you've had this whole back and forth in terms of how we need to deal with coverage and what we focus on. What are you hearing and seeing from Africans in terms of what we should be doing? And what are you hearing from Americans, African Americans, saying what Africans should be doing?
I think for Africans have a real disappointment, a continuing disappointment. A lot of Africans I speak to with the way they're covered still in the West. They still feel that when Africa is covered, and and I think it's fair, all too often across the media networks, media organizations in Africa, so in the US, in the West, it is still the stereotypes. It's still again
poor, destitute, famine,
white
corruption
savior stories.
Right.
White people coming in to save us. The ingenuity, the desire for betterment, the entrepreneurs, the women who are change makers, the inventions. It gets so much less coverage to all of that kind of theater of suffering. It is so more pronounced. And I think that's even if it gets covered now, because I will also say this, Africans make the point that Africa barely gets covered on networks like CNN now because it's all Trump. And it's not just CNN. As you know, it is all Trump everywhere. And that's one of my other criticisms about where we are, in this country. we kind of know what the Trump story is by now, right? You're either with him or you're not with him, you know? Can he say
I
anything?
ain't with his ass, but go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying.
Y'all know where we stand. Ain't with him at all.
No, I mean, and, you know, anyway, let's not go down that rabbit hole. The point being, this incessant coverage of him to the exclusion of everything else, I think Africans feel in particular, especially because a lot of the nascent media houses on the continent themselves are weak, aren't as strong, don't have the resources to give the kind of coverage they'd like to see.
But you do have, though, I look, because of the internet, because of digital, you don't have the same gatekeepers.
You don't.
Because look, this show
true.
here. I mean, matter of fact, but you know, coming in, I'm looking at, it was a tweet from a sister who's in the UK. I was in the Bahamas, and folks were quoting stories that we did.
Digital is changing the landscape.
And there are people. Look, there are people who are in African nations who also watch.
Yeah.
And so, and granted, first of all, again, I make this point all the time that when we talk about Africa, we talk about a continent. We're not talking about a country.
No, please don't.
And so,
that's just my mind.
No, but it always happens. So, what African countries do you think
have the strongest
are doing a good job with storytelling and using digital to be able to project what is happening to other parts of the world, so you can be aware? And where would you suggest folks who are watching go to look at coverage to know what's happening in those countries?
Well, I mean, I think that when you look at countries like Ghana, which are doing tremendous things, I mean, if you look at Ghana, if you look at even Kenya, if you look at South Africa, if you look at Rwanda, I mean, those markets are growing and they're increasingly robust, and their media houses are growing. But there are still problems. And Nigeria, which has a plethora of papers and organizations, they are beset by some local problems, but there is more money being pumped into them, and they are shining a light on their own stories that they feel need to be told and shipping them out, because they also have a large diaspora out there beyond those borders of the countries. So they are doing something. And then on the other side, folks like Quartz Africa are doing a really good job.
Say it again.
Quartz
have
their own Africa platform. They're doing it. And I think it's growing. And again, there are no boundaries now, because people can watch you, people can tune in and see all sorts of podcasts. But I think that there is still, I will say this, for all of the digital disruption, there's still a lot of people who still kind of see BBC, CNN, Al Jazeera as kind of blue chip.
Colonialism. No, but the other
so
thing
they
is,
still look to them first.
Right. Well, but look, that's no different here. And so
exactly.
And I think I think, you know, first of all, one of the things that I try to walk people through here, when people talk about why hasn't this changed, what's going on with African Americans, I say, well, first of all, you look at 400 years being in this country, and then if you talk about 243 years of slavery, then 92 years of Jim Crow, and granted, you had the first black newspaper in March of 1827, then of course you had the Chicago Defender in 1905, and so many others. I said the reality is you're only talking, and I use 1970 as the marker, you know, which is a year and a half after King gets assassinated. You're only talking about 49 years. I think what a lot of people also don't understand, people who have not bothered to actually read history, is that when you talk about African countries, African nations began to get their independence and freedom the same time during the Black Freedom Movement.
Yeah.
So you're only talking about 50, 55 or so years, and the reality that many of those countries were coming out of white rule, blacks not having resources, not having political power, not having experience, and then now you're coming in, and now you have different countries where you have dictators. You have very few places that has had the stability.
Not to mention that some of these countries didn't exist before communism came in and chopped up the map.
And then when white folks left, they took everything. It was kind of like, okay, y'all want it, there you go. And so now you're like, oh crap. So then you talk, and which is also why, like, for instance, when Obama was president and Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, and she was critical of Chinese investment, I was going, I'm sorry, unless you're coming with an American check, shut the hell up, because so it's a conundrum.
I'm critical of Chinese investment.
No. Here was my whole point.
Okay.
My problem was criticizing Chinese investment of African nations and not bringing a check. Don't do jack for the African countries.
Totally.
And so it's like, But if you, but and so it's a conundrum for African nations
Yes.
because they're sitting here saying, okay, I need infrastructure, I need investment. Who is talking to me?
Yeah.
Well, if the United States, if France,
If the
if
World
Britain,
Bank and others.
if all these folks are ignoring me, it's like you're leaving me with one person, and China's sitting here going, we would love to talk to you, but it's a whole bunch of strings attached to it. You know, I mean, literally, I just came from the Bahamas, and that's a big resort there. When I was there 5 years ago, it was being built. And so we were driving around, and I'm seeing all these signs in Chinese. I'm like, yo. I said, we're in the Bahamas. I said, so explain to me. They said, oh, well, what happened was the guy who was building this resort, the money came from a Chinese bank. The Chinese said, oh, if we're going to put the money up, you got to use Chinese workers.
Yeah.
They wanted to bring in 3,000 Chinese workers. The Bahamian government says, no, y'all can't do that. So they capped them at around 1,500. Then, but they said, oh, you can't bring all 1,500 in at one time. So it was like groups of 300 and 400 and 500 they had to bring in. But also part of the problem is that there were no Bahamian, how many Bahamian companies that could actually build the kind of resort?
Yeah.
And so you take that, so now when you go to the motherland, it's sort of the same thing.
Oh,
and
yeah.
so it's this
There's
whole...
lots of Chinese signs in countries on the continent that, and you find yourself thinking, same thing. There's that whole kind of, where am I? Like, there's a complete shock. Plus, the other thing is they come in, they flood the market with their workers that they bring in. They treat the locals. I'm from Sierra Leone, as I mentioned. We have a ton of Chinese people in there that have come in and are, I mean, like you said, the strings that are attached.
Right.
The abusive practices, the environmental degradation that comes with some of the things that they're doing, it will make your blood boil.
But the problem for the African nations is, I need investment.
Yeah.
And I'm left with no choice but to take a bad deal in place of no deal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that is the reality that, you know, a lot of governments are facing. Our government in Sierra Leone is no different in terms of the conversations they're having with the Chinese. And they're everywhere, you know.
Do you believe Africans want to do business and have better relationships with African Americans?
That's a really interesting question that I've been, you know, the relationship between Africans and African Americans is one that I think about.
And again, for people to and I need people who are watching to understand, it's hard to even ask that question because, again, Africa is a continent.
Yeah.
There are countries where you have long-standing relationships. So
like Ghana and African Americans have a deep bond, right? So you go to Ghana, I was in Ghana in December, and you see a lot of African Americans who've moved to Ghana.
Because Ghana has, out of all the African nations, really focused on tourism, focused on relationship, extending visas.
The year of return.
Yes.
You know,
and it was Ghana that created that phrase, the year of return.
Exactly. You know, 200 years since the start of the North Atlantic slave trade, saying you don't have to know where you're from. Just come back. You can make this home. And so there has been a systematic, intentional outreach. So a country like Ghana is proof that, yes, there are some African countries, but I don't think there's another country like Ghana that has kind of led the way.
I think the closest might be South Africa, and that's because one of the anti-apartheid movement that was here.
Exactly. That helped with ending it and divestment and all that. But I guess my question to you is, how important is it to African Americans to have a good relationship with Africans? I mean, because it cuts both ways.
Right. No, but I asked the question because I think I use the phrase, when you don't know, you don't know. And the reality is slavery severed those ties. If you are an African American and you have the ability to actually trace your history, you're going to hit a stop. If you're going to hit a stop. Now, unless, like, for instance, my maternal...
Do you know where you're...
My maternal...
You're from Sierra Leone,
My maternal...
You look like a Sierra Leonean.
My maternal, paternal ancestors migrated from Haiti. So we did some research, and there was a manifest, a shipping manifest, where we discovered the name of one of the Le Mans who traveled to Louisiana. Okay, but if you're African American and you don't have anything along those lines, there's a stopping line there because you can't, because it was severed. And I think what you have here is, in many ways, for African Americans, there is an identity with state. So when I ask the question, where are your people from? If you're in Chicago, somebody says, I'm from Chicago, you're like, where are your people from? They're going to say Mississippi or Arkansas, okay? And the reason I keep trying to explain to people why it's different for Latinos / Hispanics, and being from Texas, I use that purposely. You have identities with countries. So if you're from Peru, you're from Peru. You might be an American, but you're from Peru. If you're from Colombia, if you're from again, if you're Jamaica, El Salvador, from either you have an identity. That's why it's very interesting when there was some people who were upset Major League Baseball when they have the home run derby, and some of these foreign players are waving their country's flag because for them they're representing their country. You know, they're playing ball in the United States. If you're African American, you're not necessarily waving the Alabama flag if you're from Alabama. You might say that's where I'm from, so you have no connection.
But okay, so
and I think so. Let me go. Reverend Leon Sullivan,
right?
Deceased, passed out of Philadelphia.
Yeah.
The one who introduced Operation Breadbasket to Dr. King. Reverend Sullivan, up until his death, held an annual conference.
That's right.
In different African nations to create that alliance. And I think what it requires is that 2.0, where you have individuals who are here, and I know individuals, to your point, who have moved from here to Ghana, to other African nations, to say the relationship was severed, but we do have a lot in common, and why should we not be doing business with one another? There's an HBCU initiative starting. I was there for the opening to reconnect HBCUs and African nations. Why? Because many African leaders studied at HBCUs. Right. Lincoln University, Nkrumah is a graduate of Lincoln University. And so you have that, and I think it has, to your point, the word you use, it has to be intentional. That's what it requires. And I think once knowledge comes in, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, hold up. There is kinship there.
But I think that's my question. Is there a kinship felt? I don't know. And I ask this as someone who's lived in this country for almost 40 years. The African Americans, is there a kinship felt?
The kinship is felt.
Africa.
The kinship is felt when you go from when you don't know to when you know.
I would think, call me naive, I would think in a time like this, where there's a president of this country saying things like, go back to where you're from, and has generally stirred a sense of people not belonging, that, listen, I'm from Africa, I grew up in Africa, and so it's easy for me to say, but I would think that there would be a longing. So tell me, you're having a conversation with African Americans. There would be a longing amongst the African American community to say, you know what? I need to find out. I need to go. I'll drop down in Ghana, even if I'm not from Ghana.
But here's what I mean when I use the phrase, when you don't know, you don't know. So, Gerald Horn, Chelsea, get that book off of my desk, please. That's what I do.
Chelsea.
Chelsea.
Sorry, Chelsea.
Gerald Horn wrote a book. And get the Gerald Horn book off of my desk, please. I want to show it. Gerald Horn wrote a book called Claude Burnett and the Associated Negro Press and the Jim Crow Paradox. Now, until reading the book, I'd never heard of Claude Burnett. I run 3 black newspapers.
Yeah, and I don't know.
So Claude Burnett actually took information, and he had different people who were writing stuff, and he took black newspapers' information and supplied it to African newspapers, and took information that was happening on the continent and supplied it to black newspapers. And so for 50 plus years, he would send this packet out of material, and even some mainstream papers were looking at all of this different material. And he had these dispatches from all these different countries, and so you had all these black newspapers where we couldn't get our news from anywhere else, reading about what was happening in these countries. I remember I was at it was a restaurant in Chicago when I ran Chicago Defender. They had they basically decorated the men's bathroom with different Chicago Defender newspapers and old papers. And I'm sitting there and I'm reading a story of this cricket match that was taking place in Jackson Park of some brothers who from other countries. And I'm like, yo, seriously? Yeah. Here's the point I'm making. You had the available information that was being supplied. The problem is this is The Rise and Fall of the Associated Negro Press, Claude Burnett's Pan-African News and the Jim Crow Paradox by Gerald Horn. It's an amazing book. So I'm reading this and I'm going, wow, Gerald, and he was talking about his business ties to African countries and the exchange of information, because again, you had these African nations that were achieving independence. At the same time, they were watching African Americans fighting for freedom. You had Black entertainers like Harry Belafonte and others who were aligning, and so you sort of had that. What happened was with desegregation, with the end of segregation, you then saw your Black newspapers fall away, which also meant information. The reason he says the Jim Crow paradox is because, so at every point they struck a blow against Jim Crow, it actually was a nail in the coffin of Black media. And that's what I think the difference is. The difference is when Black media was no longer able to financially tell the story, then you had no information. So if you're Black, you didn't know what was happening about a certain sister in this country or in that country. And so I think we have to get back to the point where we are exchanging of information, informing people to go, whoa, those type of things are happening. I had no idea.
But to your point, at the time of digital now, can you even make that argument?
Yes, you can.
Because if I don't, anyone who's interested.
No, but where do I go? See, here's the deal.
Let's start with Dr. Google.
No. Follow me here. It's a bunch of stuff on Google. That's why I asked you the question. You said Quartz News, right?
Yeah.
That's why I said, if somebody's watching who's interested, where do I go? The Africa Channel, Paula Madison, her company.
There's the Africa Report. There's
okay, right.
All these people.
So I think, again, what we have to do is to say to somebody who doesn't know, okay, start here. Here are places where you can go, where you can trust to get information from. To me, this is about information. And once I have the information, once you start linking people together, once you start reminding HBCUs of your history, your lineage, where you have African leaders who graduated from HBCUs, like, hold up.
I think that's why I disagree with you.
We're not separate. We're connected.
I think that's why I disagree, because you're saying, it's not so much disagreeing with you. I think there's the nuance that I'm hung up on, because you're saying it's about information that will kind of lead to a deepening of the bond. I guess my question is, I guess my inclination is to think it should be more primordial than that, in the sense that it should be more kind of like, it should come from the inside, more emotional.
No, but it can't. It can't. Here's why.
Well, every time you look in the mirror, in this country, you walk down the road.
No. It can't. Something can't come from the inside if it's never on the inside. See,
But you know, without knowing where you're from, that you're not originally from here.
Yes. But here's the piece. You can't ignore the power of white supremacy. The power of white supremacy taught us to actually hate you.
Yeah,
Colonialism
I know.
taught you to hate us.
I don't think that's true.
Well, hold up. I've had this debate with different people.
Yeah, because I'm always having this debate.
And so what happens is, what we have to do, this is where I talk a lot on this show about a reprogramming. There has to be a reprogramming. I believe there has to be Africans do understand the power of colonialism. African Americans understand the power of white supremacy. And I think what we have to do is say, here in 2019, we have to reprogram our people to lose all that crap that was put into us in terms of not trusting, they're horrible. And then remember, we also were, just like white folks were fed the stereotypes, so were we, because we're here as well. And so we have to break those things down to get people to understand that, oh, wait a minute, hold up, I'm sorry. I'm sitting here buying somebody's view of huts and dusty roads and walking around butt naked and those things, as opposed to, no, this is what's happening here. But that only happens if I see it and I hear it, and there's information. So good information replaces bad information. And again, when I'm presented with that, now it's, whoa, hold up, I was taught this, but now I'm seeing this.
So is it that, okay, so let me ask you
That's the process to me.
So let me ask you this question. So a friend said this to me once. She said when she was, an African-American friend said to me, that when she was in school and they talked about Africa, and she was in class, you know, they talked about huts and they talked about people living in trees, and she was embarrassed. She was embarrassed to have a connection to Africa. So back when she was growing up, if someone said you were African, those were fighting words.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Because you were conditioned and trained, and remember, the greatest export in America is mass media. So mass media, not only did mass media present black people as buffoons and as just idiots, they presented Africans as savages, as folks who eat each other, as just this. So all of a sudden you're like, oh hell, I don't want any part of that. What changed that? When Alex Haley did Roots, mass media showed a different view. All of a sudden, you had this resurgence of African Americans who began to take African names.
So why hasn't the bond deepened?
Because, again, that was a moment in time. What you did not have, you have to have sustained growth. It has to be sustained. It can't be 3, 4, 5 years is hot. Then, to your point about this book, it's the exact same thing. What can't happen, media, all the attention for 4 weeks. Then, okay, we're done. We're going to go over here. What has to be sustained, and to your point about owning our story, to me, what has to be, we can't depend on CNN. We can't depend on the New York Times. We can't depend on mass media. We have to return to a point where African Americans are controlling our narrative, telling our story, and then linking with Africans to say, you're my brother's keeper, you're my brother's keeper. Let's provide the information to reprogram our people, break down those stereotypes, and then create a new state of mind to now see in Africa in a different way.
And I agree with all of that. All I would say is I don't want to underplay the part of agency, an individual agency, individual interest, individual desire.
But I can't, but I understand your point, but I can't.
That's all I'm saying.
But here's the piece, though. And here's where I would disagree with you, or where I will push back on that. The only way I'm going to know about this book if it was presented to me in a way that I understand. So if I'm depending, so how long have we not gone on this conversation? Give me the time. So we've been talking for 40 minutes. I can guarantee you there's somebody that's going to watch this interview and they're going to say, I remember that story.
Yeah. What happened there?
But okay,
it just fell off.
I didn't know all of that. There's and that's not necessarily, well, that one person who goes out and buys the book.
No, they'll buy the book.
Okay, right. Yeah, buy the book. But what I'm trying to say is that we have to understand that an individual thing still requires someone else to bring something to the fore. I can't go get something that I don't know exists. Like, I can't, if you told me, go find this, okay, what am I looking for? Just go find it. Okay. If I told my niece to go find something, she's like, am I looking in the garage, the first floor, the second floor, the third floor, in the kitchen? Where am I going?
I take your point.
I got to narrow that thing down to say, girl, it's in the kitchen. Otherwise, hell, she in the doggone garage. I'm like, what you doing out here? Well, you told me just to go look for it. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
And so our media then is able to say, yo, here's a story. For me, the ability to be, that's why I asked the question, where should they go?
Yeah.
Where should somebody go? So it's like a starter kit.
Yeah.
If y'all want to learn about, so I would say Jeff Kaninga used to be at CNN.
Yeah, that's
if you're on Twitter, follow Jeff Kaninga. Okay, he's there in Kenya.
Yeah.
Media
in
outlet,
Nigeria.
you can follow him.
There's A24, there's, there are a bunch of places.
That's my point. So what I'm saying is, if I don't even know where to look, I want to read, but I don't even know where to go. But if someone is saying, hey, here's where you start, and then now the interest is sparked. Now I'm into it. Now I'm reading into it. So for me, I went to Ghana in 2008. That was my only trip to the motherland. I'm likely going to be in South Africa in October. My readings of Malcolm X. People talk about Malcolm X when he went on his Mecca. Well, they didn't realize Malcolm X spent almost 5 months hitting multiple countries.
That's right.
When you read about Maya Angelou, when you Charlotte Hunter Galt moved to South Africa, her and her husband, after Mandela was freed, to open I think it was the NPR
bureau there.
Bureau there. And so, what that particular book, reading the relationship with Claude Barnett, and then all these entertainers and the sitting dispatches back, then now, for me, now it's like, yo, I don't only want to go to South Africa. I'm like, okay, what other countries can I go to? Again, what other media people can I align with? That, to me, begins to change because we open our mind to receive and have a broader view.
Now I wish I could hear from your viewers to hear what they make of this conversation.
You will
See
when
how
we,
many.
you will when we run it.
What? I'm trying to figure out where they sit. Who sits with you and who sits with me?
Oh, trust me, more sit with me.
No, I doubt that.
I guarantee you
God,
that.
please.
I guarantee you that.
Whatever.
You can bank on that.
Please, whatever.
I mean, you've always
No.
known more shit with me. That ain't nothing changed.
It's gonna be cold on that side of the room sitting with you.
Ain't gonna be that cold.
It's gonna be that cold.
Ice cold alpha, that's how it is. The book, Beneath the Tamarind Tree, a story of courage, family, the law school girls of Boko Haram. Isha Sesay, folks, take a look, zoom in. This is the book. Zoom in on the book. Zoom in on the book. There you go.
Thank you. Zoom, zoom.
Hey, this is my show, calm down.
Oh, whatever. You need some
Calm
help.
down.
Zoom.
Calm down, here we go.
Thank you
That's
for
the book.
thank
Be
you
sure,
for the
be
Zoom.
sure to take a look at it. I tolerate her.
Nah, please.
I tolerate
He
her.
doesn't, please.
So,
Friend.
good seeing you, Scrub.
You can't keep going around calling me scrub.
Bum.
It's been fun. It's been real, scrub.
Scrub. Holla! You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.
This is Diala Riddle, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered. Stay woke.
This is Director X, the director of Superfly on the red carpet, or the black carpet, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Yo, what up, y'all? This is Jay Ellis, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Hi, I'm Chaley Rose, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
I'm Lex Scott Davis, and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your boy Jacob Lattimore, and you're now watching Roland Martin right now. Eee.
You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it. Hey fam, want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered, the blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Press play.